So the ambassador program is all about how we can support an action research program around cultural democracy. And I like to summarize the idea of cultural democracy based on the feedback from a lady I met out in Inverness. And it's all about making culture and not consuming it. So how do we celebrate the culture that exists in all communities and isn't just about culture with a capital C, and acknowledging that everyone has expertise, everyone has creativity, everyone has skills in arts and sciences and heritage. How do we unlock and support that as much as obviously bringing in professionals? And again, this is an important discussion to mention. It's not about professionals play a really important part in that space, but I've been thinking about how I can summarize what Fun Palaces means to me with 4 different statements. So the first one is, how do we support communities to make culture and not consume it? So it's all about participation. It's about celebrating the skills that people have. The second one, I've written them down now because I have to think about these provocations, is it's valuing the process and the small wins and not the polished and shiny. Again, particularly important of this year, but I think for us, a lot of our most successful Fun Palaces that have happened in Scotland can be very small, they can be very grassroots, they can be pulled together quite last minute, and they're all about celebrating the skills and the resources that already exist. And so, again, that will be something we can talk about a little bit more, but in some ways, if the resources aren't already in the community, then focus on something else for a Fun Palace. The third provocation that I like to think about quite a lot about Fun Palace is why it's not like an arts festival or more traditional outreach. It's unearthing the forgotten everyday skills and not over the professional. And so what we mean by that is my main provocation when I ask people to get involved in Fun Palaces or people are interested is Fun Palace Weekend is about celebrating skills that aren't the professional. So if you're a professional artist or a professional scientist that we get involved, very often one of the main provocations is how can you get involved in a way that isn't about your professional skill? And in some ways that might sound a little bit counterintuitive, and that's not to say that those skills aren't valuable, but again, for us, it's about changing some of the dynamics around how we engage in communities. And again, of course, if you're a professional artist, a community participatory, working in participatory ways, you can work in a very community-led ways. But again, there's still a dynamic of the spotlight being on the professional skills. And so actually one of the things my favorite activities, which some of you did on the Jam board, is asking people to think about skills that they have that aren't to do with their professional work and how they can share that with their communities. So for example, if we're working with scientists, for me, Fun Palace is not an opportunity for them to share their science. They could do that the rest of the year. But actually, it's about asking people to think, well, actually, what other skills do you have? Could you share with your communities? And what new conversations and different power dynamics does that lead to it? And obviously, that's not what you might want to be doing year round. But at the same time, it might open new conversations and slightly more different types of conversations and more exciting, maybe more experimental things. And there's something really empowering by saying, I'm going to talk about Gaelic, even though it has nothing to do with my work. I'm still very much a learner, but actually there's something empowering about, well, I'm not an expert in it, so you could absolutely learn that too. And that's a really key spirit of Fun Palaces. And then the last point, I think, is about very similar to the process. For us, Fun Palaces is all about deeper connections and not about footfall. So again, perhaps in previous years, we have had lots of Fun Palaces. I'm sure Stella can tell you all the numbers. She knows them off the top of her head. But for us, it's the most exciting Fun Palaces tend to be ones where actually, if you are genuinely working together with your local communities over a period of time to create an event together, sharing different types of skills, even if only 1 or 2 people come up, that's still a success because the process has been the important thing. The long-term impact is much more to do with those relationships that we're building together and not necessarily about delivering that final event. The final event obviously can be amazing. It's great to be part of a weekend of action, which is global, which helps bring people together. The sum is greater than its parts, but the process is the important thing. That's the really revolutionary thing that will lead to change. So I'm going to stop there in terms of what I think a fun palace is. I'm going to bring in some other makers as well. But just to also let you know, one of the main projects we've been working on at the moment, certainly from my side, is about supporting a community of practice. So we've set up a Culture and Wellbeing Community Network Scotland group, and that's a Facebook group where we're hoping to bring people across sectors. We're all, despite in different sectors, facing the same issues in terms of how do we make sustainable changes, how are we more grassroots and community-led, how do we challenge, you know, the challenges around funding cycles, around, you know, always need for impact, and actually how do we work in ways that are genuinely empowering. And I think that's something that all sectors are challenged with, especially during what's going to happen next with the release of the lockdown. And so we're bringing together lots of different people online with regular discussions, and that's in partnership with Slick. And at this point, I will actually introduce Lindsey as well to talk a little bit about why the Scottish Libraries Information Council are involved with fun palaces over the next 2 years and the ambassadorship. So Lindsey, if you want to unmute yourself.
Thanks, Lewis. Hi, so I'm Lindsey. I am Head of Programme at the Scottish Library and Information Council. For people that don't know, I know there's some library people here, but for some non-library people, we are the independent advisory body to the Scottish Government on library and information related matters. And we're also a membership organisation, so all 32 local authorities in Scotland to look after libraries in Scotland are members of us, so we are connected to all 32 library authorities. I suppose when I was preparing for this today, I was trying to think a little bit about what Slick hope to achieve in the next, well, I suppose it's 18 months now. We started back in November 2019, and the world has changed so dramatically since November 2019, and what we'd set out to do with Lewis has probably changed quite a bit in that time. And I think I've probably dialed it down to about 6, I think, so our kind of 6 hopes for maybe not the next 18 months, but at least the next 6 months, taking us up to kind of Christmas time. So I think our first hope is around being connectors. So we want to connect Lewis to libraries in Scotland, and in turn we want libraries to be connected back to fun palaces. So I think we're on that journey already, Lewis, with that those connections are happening, hopefully. I think our second thing we want and we hope to be is positive promoters of fun palaces. So we want to spread the message, especially some of those messages, those key messages that Lewis has just been talking about that he introduced. We want to be part of that process of getting those positive messages out to libraries, and then encouraging libraries to go out to their communities and speak about some of these messages around cultural democracy. And I think the third key aim for us is to empower people, especially the library services, because I think library services have gone through a really funny time where their actual physical spaces have been closed, and they're not used to having connections in the way that they had before this. But I think that doesn't mean that communities won't see libraries as being at the heart of their community anymore. So I think as Slick, we've got a role to play in reminding and empowering libraries that actually they are still key connectors in the community, and they are often seen as the heart of the community. And then in turn, I think it's about empowering libraries to go out there, and it's going to be more important than ever that libraries play a role in connecting people. And just because those connections might happen in a different way doesn't mean they're any less valuable. So as Slick, we hope to empower libraries to connect with their communities, to encourage their communities to make and to create and to share with each other. So I think that's at the moment, and as we kind of move into this new world we're going into, I think that is kind of where Slick see ourselves, hopefully being part of this journey, that we want to be connectors, we want to be positive promoters, and we want to help empower the libraries to empower the communities.
Great. Thanks very much, Marie. And yes, just I suppose, you know, our vision is how can we help libraries be part of that cultural ecosystem, and the libraries to be, well, they already are fun palaces year round, to be spaces where we can connect sciences and arts and creativity and health and well-being on that kind of everyday level. Now, in terms of fun palaces, we've had lots of different fun palaces in Scotland. And so that could range from, we've had lots of libraries take up fun palaces, so Midlothian, Fife have done fun palaces for many years, Western Isles. We've had art centres like McRobert run fun palaces where they tried to do a little bit different. So they did Share My Table, and they had deaf-led dance classes, which were really impactful and powerful. We've had heritage organisations, so National Trust for Scotland got involved last year, for example, and opened up a lot of their sites for their staff to share different skills and their volunteers to share different skills. And actually was one of the biggest impacts, was actually volunteers who originally said, you know, they were there to volunteer about heritage and they don't have any other skills. But actually, once you open that conversation up, we had, you know, volunteers in the National Trust who shared folk tales and fairy tales, and that became actually part of the National Trust's kind of program. And obviously that changed with the lockdown. But actually, that's the type of transformation as well that we're really interested in, is engaging staff and volunteers, and obviously community members in very different ways to think about venues in different ways and who they belong to. And so actually with that, I thought I'm going to introduce Stuart, who's been one of our makers for the last 3 years now. Is that Stuart?
Yeah, that's right.
Fantastic. So if you want to spend a few minutes, it would be great to hear a bit more about the Fun Palaces over the years for you.
So I'm going to share with you some of the photos, and I'll talk you through the various things that we've done each year and kind of what we've taken away from each year. So starting back in 2007 was 2017 was the first year we ran. The was and what it would mean for us. So I work for Auchinleck Community Development Initiative, which is based in a community centre in Auchinleck, which is also where the library is located. So collaborating with the library was an obvious choice of venue for us. So looking at what we could offer in the library, it was things like arts and crafts, and we also did some spy quest as well, which was augmented reality. So we had quite a few young people come along, and the questions were all on the computers and to try and crack the case. Was there that was kind of exploring it and kind of bringing together the art side of things and the science side of things through the kind of augmented reality. So the following year we tried to build on that a bit and gave it more of a theme. So the theme was kind of autumn, harvests and Halloween. So one of the highlights from that was the scarecrow that Auchinleck Primary School put together for us. And we also did quite a range of different autumn activities. So we did like laminating leaves to make things to put up in the windows, and we did pumpkin carving as well. And I'll show you some of the finished pumpkins there. And they got put out in our community garden. I think for us as well, one of the interesting things about the Fun Palace is the different ways of doing the evaluation and the way that you're encouraged to do something a wee bit more creative alongside the standardised survey. So one of the things we did was plant your ideas in the planter. So we got them to write emotions and ideas on lollipop sticks and get them to put them in the planters in the community garden, which gave us a wee bit of a different way of looking at how to do the evaluation. Having done that method the first couple of times, we decided to try a new kind of direction for the 2019 Fun Palace, and that was more about looking at kind of small groups in the local area. So as well as having the crafts again in the library, which was things such as painting the fairy doors and that sort of thing, we also had local groups in the main hall. So we had the Amdram group come along and sing and play some music for us. And we also had the art book come along and they put on a wee display of the their artwork, and encouraged people to take part, and they were showing some kind of techniques using different materials such as the pastels and their paints and that sort of thing. So for us, the Fun Pals brought about that opportunity to connect with the different groups that we maybe wouldn't have had if it hadn't been for the Fun Palace concept. To say, we've come along, we're having this, we're bringing together different groups, would you like to be a part of it? And it gave the groups a chance to connect with each other that they wouldn't normally have, because they would normally just come into the centre, go into the room and just do their own thing without having a chance to kind of connect up with the other groups that go on in the community centre. So that shows us kind of moving towards a slightly more co-creation aspect of the Fun Palace. I think, as Lewis says, it is a lot more about valuing the process and valuing the skills and trying to keep it simple. I think our expectations for that day was for it to be a lot busy and loads of people to come in and learn the skills from the groups and that. But it was those connections between the groups that I think were one of the most important things that we took away from that day. And as it says, you don't need to make it too polished and aim too high. There's so many skills there, and I think what people maybe get caught up in too much is that they're looking too much at their professional skills, but there's so many skills and hobbies that you might be able to bring from your personal life into a Fun Palace that we could give it a different kind of aspect for you.
Thanks very much, Stuart. And I know there was a big, one of the things that we've been tackling with a little bit in terms of, sometimes it's almost a bigger ask. So in some ways it's easier to just say, if you're a venue or an organization, we're going to offer free family art activities. And that's a very easy thing to articulate. It's an easy kind of poster, if you imagine, and that's, you can attract families that way. But I know in the last year, there's a real focus on, and I know it was similar in places like Midlothian libraries, for example, where it was like, come and share a skill. And I think that's actually maybe one of the challenges, is how do you articulate that and share that? And I think a lot of it is just working with groups as early as you can to kind of coach them along that way. And I think it's okay to sometimes scaffold activities that you can bring together, just to kind of bring that together and build on that, so that people feel more, they understand that element of it, and then actually are gently encouraged to share something. And sometimes even the word skill isn't maybe the right word, but it's just doing things together, and all of a sudden it's like, oh yeah, I can do that. Or one of my favorite activities during a workshop was we had 2 young people who taught us sign language, just because they already knew it, and it just came out spontaneously because her sister needed sign language. So it was, you never know what these conversations can lead to. So to connect this to the bigger picture, I've got Stella, who's one of the co-directors and founders of Fun Palaces. So do you want to take it away, Stella?
Sure. You'll see that Sarah Jane, who's the other co-director and founder, has snuck in as well. She wasn't coming, but she's here now. She's not got a picture though. Okay, we've got 6 minutes. I'm going to try and get this so that we get back to time, Lewis. All right. So in 2013, Sarah Jane and I co-founded Fun Palaces with the dream to celebrate Joan Littlewood's centenary on the 6th of October 2014. We thought maybe half a dozen or 20 places would want to join in. Quite shockingly, 138 places joined in the first year. We started it with no money. Sarah Jane always says it was on our kitchen tables, but I am lucky enough to have an office. It was on her kitchen table. And we did it mostly overnight, late at night, when her kids were in bed and I'd finished a couple of other jobs. It is not a, there are other companies like us where people get jobs being the CEO. This is not that. We literally made it up 7 years ago, 8 years ago, 7 years ago, 2013. And our first annual weekend was in 2014. We didn't expect it to grow as fast as it has. And we are constantly playing catch up. But the best thing about it, is that we have never pretended that we know what we're doing. Genuinely. And I know that people say this in meetings, but I promise you that's true from us. All we do know is that the communities that work with us and make fun palaces know where they live and know their own people far better than we do. And we have hung on to that because it's the truth, and it's also what much more hierarchical and traditional arts and community organisations don't get. The dream around cultural democracy is that we genuinely also believe that anyone can do this. And so what Lewis was saying about not bringing your professional skills, and I see down on the list here of the people in the chat, some of you are participatory artists, and I'm really sorry to piss you off, but I'm going to do it. Don't bring your participatory art. Support someone who's never done it to lead. And library staff, don't deliver. I know this is really hard to hear, but I promise you that when you stop delivering, it frees you up to be amazing and do phenomenal other things. I totally get, though, after years and years of being told, deliver something, plan it brilliantly, give it over. We're asking a really different thing. We know we're asking a different thing. We know it's hard to leap into. Our experience and the stories that people tell us after they've done that are that it's worthwhile. And as Lewis said, and as Stuart said, it's more about the process than the product anyway. So if what you end up with is a bit shit, that's also fine. I promise you, aiming towards something that is messier, more chaotic, way less traditional than anything you've ever done before, it's one day a year, maybe a half day, maybe this year it's just 2 hours, gives you the opportunity to try some other stuff that you wouldn't normally do. I say all of these things, and I really want you to know this. I've been a freelance artist since I was 18 when I got my equity card. I'm 57. It's nearly 40 years. I do know that what we're asking is beyond the ordinary and not what most of us have trained ourselves up to do. So I get that that's difficult, but our experience is it makes a massive difference. And not just on the weekend. The difference it makes is the connections that people make the rest of the time. And by me, as an artist, not doing my thing, I'm a novelist and I could run a creative writing workshop with my eyes closed, literally, but that would be stupid in a fun palace. What I am is I'm a yoga passionate enthusiast. Lewis, the word I like to use is passions rather than skills. But Dan, who does our comms, doesn't like it. He thinks it sounds too sexy. So I would happily share something else that I'm keen on. You know, I've got better at growing tomatoes from seeds, right? That kind of thing allows, the reason we do it, I'm trying to make sure I'm in the camera. When I teach you how to do something, I probably use my hands or my body. It becomes an embodied practice. When we talk to a complete stranger, whether it's over a cup of tea or over a pint, it's hard work for most people to talk to a stranger. And it is harder work for the people who are usually excluded from our societies, from our arts, from our sciences, and from our connections. And to ask people to come into our venues and our buildings and say, here, you just join in and we'll support you, is really, really difficult. I'm also the youngest of 7 kids from a council estate in southeast London. I promise you, I'm talking about my family when I say it's really difficult for some people to come into our venues. I'm not talking about those people over there. And so what we've discovered is that the fewer barriers we put up, the way that we don't treat ourselves as the people who know what's going on in every community is what makes a difference. That's a background. This year, we started a thing called Tiny Revolutions in March as a response to COVID. And we're talking to Renfrewshire later, right? Did I say that right? Have I said it wrong? Sorry. I'm half London, half New Zealand. You can blame either of those things. They just run with Tiny Revolutions, and Tiny Revolutions is a way to support people to do stuff offline as well as online. As I'm sure you'll know, there are so many people in Britain who don't have access to the internet, not just because the 3G or the 4G is rubbish where they live, but libraries people, you'll know that your spaces are where so many people get their internet. The cafes are shut. The people who go there can't get the internet. One of our veteran Fun Palaces makers is on a disability benefit. He's got 90 minutes of data a day. He's not going to waste that watching a play from the National Theatre. He's going to use it to do important things that he needs to do in his life. So we've tried to do a lot of stuff that is also offline. And I noticed that was in one of the questions that came in earlier. So I'm happy to chat about that later. It's also Tiny Revolutions on our website. Nearly there. Okay. And what we've done with this is we've gone, oh my God, we can do something else. So this year we're going to do 1,000 tiny fun palaces. It's terrifying to me to even say a number, because I don't know if you saw in the yes, oh yeah, the end result, absolutely, Hannah, the permission is totally to be a bit shit. The more bit shit you are, the better your fun palace is, in my opinion, and the Sarah Jane's opinion, and we made it up, so you know. It's just because when you're a bit shit, you get magic, right? We all know this. Einstein, the scientists will correct me if I'm wrong, but Einstein's special theory of relativity wasn't quite right. It had mistakes in it and it wasn't quite there. He went away and did some more work with Minkowski, who was his teacher. He came back with the general theory of relativity. We only make magic when we make mistakes on the way. Anyway, this year, 1,000 tiny fun palaces. We're slightly changing the website. We're really encouraging people to step up and lead in their own communities, but really small. So maybe it lasts an hour and you only have 5 people in your front garden or the balcony of your estate. Or maybe it's, and we really want to encourage people who've been shielding to lead and not just be done to. You know, a lot of our friends with fun palaces from our previous work and other things we're connected to are disabled people. Some of you know Jess Tom, who performs as Tourette's Hero. She was saying on Twitter just this weekend, she hasn't left her flat in 14 weeks. People who are in this position are being done to at the moment, and they're being done to far too much. They're still leaders. They're still amazing creative people who could be doing stuff. So we're hoping to share lots of ways that people who are shielding could also lead. People who are offline, we're going to be sharing stuff about that too. We think the resources are all going to be ready in about a week and a half, maybe sooner, but definitely about maybe 2 weeks. But we've got a whole bunch of new stuff to share. Okay, I'm shutting up. That's it. You can ask me questions later. That's fun palaces in 7 minutes.
So, and please do, if you do have any questions, please do use the chat function over there as well. And as I said, we'll have plenty of time.
Sorry, Lewis. I'm
Yep.
not saying that your work that's not shit is bad, okay? All I'm saying is that I'm a novelist. I spend years working on these things. But what I'm saying is for fun palaces purposes, you don't have to make it clean and tidy around the edges. And the wilder bits are quite often where you're going to make the connections in your community you would never otherwise make.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. Please do come in at any point, Stella. But yes, if you have any questions, please do put them into the chat. And as I said, we are going to break out into groups a little bit later to focus on different things. To give a bit more focus about what's happening next year as well, I thought I'd introduce Alice, who is our other Fun Palace ambassador as well. She couldn't make it today herself, but she has filmed something in advance. So I'm going to try and play that, technology willing, just to introduce our Eden Court ambassador. So let's have a wee go. So okay, hopefully this is working.
Hi, I'm Alice Ballance, also known as Fun Palace Alice, and I am the other half of the Scotland Fun Palaces team. So I share that role with Lewis. And I think the work that Lewis has been doing recently with culture and well-being through this Facebook group has been amazing. And I really, really enjoyed being part of the storytelling workshop recently. Now I joined the Fun Palaces team because I really, really love everything that it stands for, especially, you know, that everyone's a scientist, everyone an artist. And I think it's probably especially close to my heart, you know, living up here in the Highlands and coming from that culture. It's especially close to my heart because a fun palace in itself reminds me a lot of a ceilidh house. You know, those ceilidh houses that we used to have back in the good old days, where there would be a house and in a community and everybody would go around there and we'd be sharing stories and music, but not just that, you know, we'd also be sharing lots of other skills. You know, if somebody was knitting or sewing or weaving, you know, they'd be sharing those skills with other people. And it's so much part of our culture. And it's that idea of, you know, that we can create our own culture, you know. And I think at the moment, especially, with all the big buildings going into hibernation. I think the way that culture is looking is that, you know, over the coming months and possibly even, you know, the next year or two, we're not going to be able to look to these large scale organized, sort of professionally organized events and cultural events. And so I think it's going to be ever more the case that we are going to be creating our own culture, our own events. And, you know, that as much as being something that is, you know, a challenge, it's a big change, but it can also be an opportunity for us to get back some of that community spirit, some of that, you know, we can create our own entertainment. And now's the time to do it more than ever. And frankly, you know, I think we all need fun more than ever. And so I'm really excited, you know, in spite of the times that we're living in at the moment and all the restrictions, I am really excited about Fun Palaces Weekend, which is coming up in October. But we're starting to think ahead, you know, it's the time will soon pass, and we're starting to think about that now. We're starting to think about how that could look. So we're imagining that it's going to be tiny Fun Palaces. Everything's going to be small scale, you know, we're not going to be envisaging that we're going to be doing great big events the way we might have done in the past. So what that could look like, for example, I've got a few folks signed up for Fun Palaces for this year, for tiny Fun Palaces. So for example, it's some friends in a garden sharing crafting skills. It's a family sharing Minecrafting and knitting, crocheting and weaving skills. And, you know, if they can get folk over the garden fence to share in that, or social distancing, we're allowed to meet up indoors, then, you know, other people will be welcome to join in. So it's not in isolation. And of course, if we had gone, you know, if we were to go back to some form of lockdown, then, you know, these could be held by Zoom. So we're getting used to being flexible now, I think, aren't we, all of us? Another Fun Palace I've got signed up, slightly bigger scale. So a lovely local artist has decided that, having set up a WhatsApp group in order to bring her street together and keep them connected during lockdown, she realised that, you know, a lot of the folk in our street, they just don't know each other. So she's decided to hold a socially distanced street party as a Fun Palace, and she'll co-produce that with her neighbours. So that's really exciting. So I think that's what we're going to be talking about on the Facebook session, this coming Facebook session, how we can set up tiny Fun Palaces. And so that was just to give you some ideas there of what's happening up north and how we're thinking about it. But, you know, everyone will have their own ideas, and that's great. That's brilliant. So yeah, enjoy the discussion and good luck setting up those, making those tiny Fun Palaces. Cheers.
Great, I'll stop sharing. And just if you've got any questions, do raise them. There's a little bit of history from Stella in the chat as well. It was great. I was going to bring in very briefly Lucy from Eden Court as well. I can't see you, but Lucy. Oh, there you go. Hello.
Hello. I am here, I promise. Sorry, Lewis. Do you want to pose me a specific question?
No, I thought just talk as the host and what your hopes are for Tiny Fun Palaces Weekend.
Okay, great. So hi everyone, I'm Lucy. I'm the head of engagement at Eden Court Theatre in Inverness, which is an art centre here in the Highlands, and I am lovely Fun Palace Alice's colleague. So I kind of became aware of Fun Palaces about 2 years ago. That was the first time I met Lewis and Sarah Jane and Stella, and a number of the other ambassadors and hosts as well, and instantly felt like everything that was being spoken about was completely in line with our values at Eden Court and our aspirations for our venue. We take our civic duty really, really seriously. We are a publicly funded organisation. We are in receipt of a lot of public money, which means that as a venue and a space, we have to do absolutely everything we can to be a place for everyone. for artists, for communities, for participants, for audiences, and for people who maybe just need to get out of the rain as well. So that's where we are coming from as a venue. We held our first set of Fun Palaces during the Fun Palace weekend last year, and Stella will laugh at this. We were probably guilty of leading a bit too much. I work in a team of 10 facilitators and creative learning practitioners. So although we didn't lead on our art form, we definitely did a lot of leading. But it was good. It wasn't particularly pretty or tidy. And we were really looking forward to 2020, which is obviously now going to happen in a really different way. In the Highlands, I think we have been really nervous to try connecting with our communities digitally because we didn't think we would be able to make it work in as meaningful a way. But if lockdown has proven anything, it's that you can still have really meaningful engagements online. And sometimes the tech works and sometimes it doesn't. But generally speaking, the richness of the interaction is still there. And we've seen that a number of times across various projects that we do now, which feels really, really exciting. The only other thing I thought that would be worth mentioning is, as our, Alice, bless her, she started in February. She had 4 weeks in the building before the building was shut down, and we've not been back in it since. But particularly as we start to think about what recovery for a building like Eden Court will look like, we realise that we have a lot of people that hold us accountable, which is great, right? Because we receive public money, we should be held accountable for the things that we do. But the people who speak the loudest and who give us their feedback in the most willing way are people who use us in a really sort of consuming way. And so what we're hearing the loudest about our recovery is mainly people telling us that they want it to stay the same. So we know that we've got to work really hard to make sure that other communities are represented in that noise as well, so that Eden Court can aspire to be and be better than it was before. So yeah, for us, community development and audience development, they are on a par. They are the same thing. It's not just about developing an audience to purchase tickets. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thanks very much.
Welcome.
I know we're going through lots of different very fast. There's lots to get through, but hopefully there's more chance to kind of start breaking that down in the breakouts. The last voice I want to bring in before we do go have a breakout and have a quick comfort break as well is if we can bring the Renfrewshire team in, if that's possible, just because they've been doing some interesting things around Tiny Revolutions. As we've said, lots of it is going to be suitable offline, and that's been a particular concern in a lot of the work that we've been trying to do. So Heather, would you like to talk a wee bit about how Renfrewshire have taken the Tiny Revolutions and how you might be building that into the Fun Palace weekend as well, because that could be a model that other organisations might be thinking about.
Yeah, hi everybody. Thanks for asking us to have a wee chat. Kate's here as well. Hi Kate. So yeah, just to give you a sort of quick roundup of where we are. Kate had found out about Fun Palaces and had previously worked on one before. Am I right in saying that, Kate?
Yeah.
And we were really keen to start one up in Paisley this year. We had an initial meeting, and unfortunately, due to all the coronavirus, it was very quickly we thought we need to change our approach in this. Kate had been at one of the Tiny Revolutions of Connection meeting, and Kate and I had a chat afterwards, and it came about that what we were trying to do as an arts team and as a cultural service was still have that cultural engagement and try and encourage people to be as creative as possible while we're still in lockdown. So we've come up with a Tiny Revolutions of Renfrewshire. So it's hashtag Tiny Revolutions Ren. And really it's just, we're working with partners in Renfrewshire. I'll pass over to Kate, who's going to do a wee bit of talking about what it is that we actually do.
Yeah, so like, I mean, at the moment, it kind of is a little bit more online than offline, but we are working towards that. What we do is we send out a Tiny Revolution every Friday. So that's hosted on our website. I also send them out as like, they're basically just a sheet, like a piece of paper that people could either print out or they could look at them on their computer. I also send them out to like a few people, community partners who circulate them to their groups. So what we kind of started just initially using some of the Tiny Revolutions that Stella's main site, and then kind of adapting them a little bit for kind of our audiences and or people that we work with. So like, for example, this week we teamed up with Kairos Women's Space because they were launching like their first zine. So I said, right, well, why don't we use like, there's a little quarantine idea from the Tiny Revolutions page. And we used that as a starting point and kind of gave it a twist with their sort of the people that they work with and the groups that they work with. So it was kind of a way of promoting their work, and they promoted our little project. And that's just a way we hope to kind of connect with people and bring more people into the whole Tiny Revolutions program. So in terms of creating ideas, we are sort of developing that a little bit now, trying to work with more partners and more community groups who bring in ideas to us, and then we kind of like promote them, if you like. So we're planning to do it every week over summer, and with an activity coming out every week and in the run up to like the Fun Palaces weekend. So I don't know, did you want to say anything about the partners, Heather? That's been the most successful part of the project so far, really.
Yeah, we started and we took a colleague very similar down in Hull, and he said that trying to get people to take part and finding out who's taking part was the hardest bit. But so far we've been overwhelmed by the amount of partners and members of the community who run organisations who have got in touch, who are really keen to come up with an activity, either themselves or with the groups that they're working with. So it's been quite, there's been quite broad ranges. We've had dance organisations. There's someone who does a knitting workshop with the young people in a community group who are really keen to get involved. But as Kate said, right now it's been a lot of online work, but we're branching out to do this offline. We were approached by the council who are running the community hubs, and they carry out give food parcels to people in Renfrewshire who are currently in need of them, and as well as that, they're trying to think of creative ways to get people keeping busy. So we are working with them just now actually to look at an offer offline, as well as Kate working on an artist in residence project, which in the next few months will hopefully see some outdoor activity happening, which will all tie in with the Fun Fact Palaces activity in October. So rounding everything that we're doing just now up, we hope to have a celebration of Tiny Revolutions of Renfrewshire as part of a Fun Palace weekend. That currently ideas is putting artwork in park railings across Renfrewshire. Some organisations are doing walking trails, and we're looking to work with active communities to host walking trails with some artwork throughout. And we're also looking at a touring gallery of some sort, which will go through Renfrewshire. And then Kate, are you able to speak a wee bit about the mapping, the creative map?
Yeah, I think another, well, it sort of brings it back round to having things that are offline. So, and then tying it back into going back online, if you like. I don't know if any of you know about, there's a company in Leeds called Slung Low, and they do amazing work, but they've done a gallery called LS11. It's worth checking out. But what they've done is people have sent artworks in or ideas, and they've made them into little laminated boards. They go up all around wherever the people are living and from, I think, and then they've sort of mapped those back. They put them onto lampposts, and then they've mapped those back into like an online map. So you can kind of look at the art online, but it's actually in the real world as well. So I think I'm gonna maybe try and think about something along those lines as well. I'm not quite sure what, but I think, yeah. And one other thing we were just hoping to, like, obviously the resources like the Fun Palaces Tiny Revolutions page, we've got our web page now with the resources on, and like, please use them. You know, to download them and share them and use them if they're useful. You know, if there's things on there that you know, you think, oh, that would be a nice thing to do with a group that I've got running or something like that. We'd just love it if anybody wants, you know, they're there for everybody. This week's going to be a Desert Island Disc, so that's in partnership with like Renfrew Mental Health Arts and Film Festival. and it's basically making like a 12-inch painting of your favorite record. So it's like an online desert island discs. So I think that's kind of it. I think, is that right?
I think that's us. I think Kate had come up with the idea of having the whole of Renfrewshire as a fun palace for either that weekend or part of that weekend, and not just focusing now on one specific place like we had originally thought before COVID happened. So it's just now about celebrating the creativity that's happened through lockdown, but also keeping that. The hope is that we run these weekly activities past October and by lockdown. So yeah.
There's a lot of interest. We probably couldn't we? Yeah.
I'll share the email just now with everyone if they're not the email, sorry, the website if you're interested, and we can upload it all as well onto Fun Palace's website.
That'll be great.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Heather, Kate. And I think what's so exciting there is, I think it's that building up of relationships beforehand, and I think what'll be really interesting is that celebration, or Stella has lots of thoughts about this in terms of also, it's a commemoration as well of what the toll of lockdown has been, and Fun Palaces can have that more serious elements as well, I think.
Can I just jump in, Lewis? Sorry, there's a really beautiful Tiny Revolution. We've shared about 56, 58 of them since March. And there was one sent to us by somebody who we didn't know. Most of them have come in the past few months from complete strangers. And she made this rainbow on the railing opposite her flat on the day of her father's funeral, because she wasn't able to attend it. And she sent just and it's a really short little piece. I'll put a link to it later. But we've had so much response from that. And I think, a very good friend of mine was on a ventilator for 4 weeks. He's probably going to be in rehab for a year. He still can't speak. There are people who have died, and we need to remember them. And there are people who are still really struggling with their health, and absolutely will be by October. So the word fun can be difficult for Fun Palaces. We are trying to say that anything that connects people could be fun. And so please feel that it's really okay as well to commemorate people that have died, to acknowledge the losses, because that's all really important in our communities too.
Thanks, Stella. Now we're quickly moving on to the bit. I know we've been talking a lot, so I think it would be great for us to have a bit of a breakout. I know some of you can't make necessarily the next bit, which is totally fine, and I'll explain that. But just in terms of next actions, I'm going to be emailing everyone a set of links, just so you can follow a lot of these things up. I guess one of the practical elements that we're certainly encouraging people to think about at the moment, if you are even thinking about doing a Fun Palace, is that there is a Fun Palace map. There are toolkits. Next week, we will be sending out a bit more information with more ideas and guidelines, both from a health and safety point of view, but just also in light of the slight change with Tiny Fun Palaces, focusing on the small, the hyperlocal, the spontaneous, whatever it would be, whatever magic that can bring. But we are encouraging people to sign up for Fun Palaces on the map as well. So there is a map, and even if you don't know what that will look like yet, what's empowering about that is you can just say, we don't know what it's going to look like yet, but we would love to do a Fun Palace. And what that means is other people, members of the community who look at the map, can see what might be happening nearby, and with a sense of, if you want to get involved, please let us know and put yourselves up there. Stella, you want to jump in?
Ravina, can you just say very quickly the tiny bit that you've written that's not going to be on our website for another week and a half about what they do when they're signing up, just so that it's the stuff about the postcode?
Yeah, if you think that you want to make a Fun Palace, even if you don't know what it might be yet, but you know that you want to do something, you need to go onto our website and click Make a Fun Palace, and then you'll be led to a registration area. So you just add your email and name, and there's a couple of questions for kind of equal ops monitoring, and then you have to verify your email as well, like you do with any other kind of website, and then you'll be led to create your Fun Palace. The site has quite a lot of different tools that you can use to in the process of making your Fun Palace go live. But really the kind of basic information that you need to put in is that you need to create a title for your Fun Palace. So usually something that just, maybe it's the place where you are, if it's a local area, or if it is attached to the library, it could be the name of your library. So you put that in as the title. Just write a short piece of description about what's going to happen, if you know, or something like, we are working on our ideas, keep checking back. And then you need to add a location for the Fun Palace, and this will make it go live on the Fun Palace's map. So if you can find, if you know where it's going to be, then obviously you can put the postcode of that location. If you haven't decided yet where it will be, you could put your home address, or you could put an address for your town. As long as there is a postcode in the Google search, where there's a kind of field where you can put your postcode in, as long as it pops up there, it should create a pin on the map, and you can change it at any time by logging back into the account. But yeah, if you just check that it is on our map, we've got a new website, so we're just monitoring that everything's working okay. So that's why we're kind of telling everyone in detail how to do that. But yeah, if you have any problems, you can just email us at hello@funpalaces.co.uk and we can help you.
Great. All right, thank you very much, Ravina.
I have a quick question. Can you hear me? My question is about, do you have some advice for people who want to create a Fun Palace but don't control a space? So they don't have a park or a library, but they're the ones who are driving it. So what about the person in the community who says, I would like a Fun Palace, where could I make one?
I'll answer what's happened before, and then Lewis, you might want to talk a bit more locally.
Sure.
So it's you, Alison, wasn't it? Yeah. What normally happens is that people quite often get in touch with us and they say, I'm trying to do a Fun Palace here. Can you put me in touch with the venue or something? And because we're in our 7th year now, we quite often know other people who've done it before, and maybe they're not on the map yet. Looking at the map and seeing who has already signed up is also helpful in case there's somebody near you. We use social media a lot, and Twitter is very good for nationwide, doing that, so Bethan doesn't tell me off. Facebook is very good locally, and we found that that's very helpful for putting people in touch with venues. Right now, of course, it is much more tricky. So what we're suggesting is that tiny Fun Palaces happen in parks, in gardens, maybe in library spaces, seeing as library spaces are opening. I know the dates are different in all of the 4 nations, but they are looking to open anyway. But even so, they may be outside. And I know the weather's not always great, but we have often had brilliant weather in the first week of October. So that's, I mean, it's always a bit of try it and see, but we are very happy to be a hub for putting people in touch. And Lewis, you're probably much better on that more locally.
So we've been hearing a bit of an anxiety about people doing things in parks because they sort of feel like they don't own the park. Like, are we allowed to? Do we own the park? So that's the kind of, we're kind of used to those anxieties a bit.
If you're doing a very small thing that have 6 people in it.
So it's just little.
Yeah.
And I guess, Alison, just to maybe, I think particularly of this year, I think actually in some ways, we mentioned venues a lot because we know there's quite a lot of venues on the call, but actually, some of the best Fun Palaces can be really, really local. And actually we are imagining this year, it could even be a Fun Palace within someone's own home as much as they are comfortable to do it. And it might be that they do it out in the garden, and how, I suppose the point of it is it could even just be doing a tiny revolution or sharing a tiny revolution or sharing it with a venue. I think there's going to be an interesting discussion this year about how a venue or an organization could host very local Fun Palaces themselves. And it could be, in the case of Renfrewshire, encouraging people to do their own activity at home and then just open it up in small different ways. So it could just be like playing out into a garden or putting a poster up on the window to encourage people to engage in a safe way. So any other questions?
Hi.
Hi, Cindy.
Hi. This is all new to me, and it sounds brilliant. It's fantastic. I'm very much into the grassroots idea. What I'm trying to get my head around, though, is I'm a workshop facilitator myself, and it's the idea of trying to get engagement from people to bring ideas forward and act on them. And from experience and from the way I've worked with other things, that working behind the scenes to encourage and get people to bring forward things is how I would normally do things. But what I'm hearing seems to be more standing back from even doing that. Am I right to interpret that the way I am? Because I think I see so many fantastic people out there who really don't appreciate what they've got to share and wouldn't even consider that it was something worthwhile. So it's that bridge that I'm kind of trying to get my head around, what you're saying, what you're communicating. And, you know, I am also a practitioner, I'm a musician, so I very much get the idea that this isn't about me delivering something, but it's that engagement and trying to encourage and promote other people that I really want to understand how you see that working.
Cindy, I just did answer this in the other group, so I'm going to repeat what I said. No, in the hope that I was right first time. One, we don't want to ask you to give your artwork for free, right? We're artists too. We don't want to be asking artists to work for free. That's why we're saying don't give your thing, okay? And I mean, you're welcome to if you want to, but so many things say to the artists, give for free. We are encouraging people to give their passions and their excitements for free and things that they're excited by. As a facilitator, I would say the facilitator's role, mine too as a workshop leader, is to stand aside and support someone else to lead. Maybe someone who hasn't led before, maybe someone you know who's a young workshop leader who needs a bit of practice. And it's about supporting, and all of our work, I promise you, I actually did the same thing before. We spend all the time on the phone saying yes. That's all we ever do, right? This is, seriously, people say to me, yeah, but what do you do, Stella? I'm like, well, I run workshops and I tell people to make it a bit shit. And then we spend a lot of time saying to complete strangers, yes, that sounds like a great idea. So much of the work, and the other thing I said in the other group is I've gone off the words empower and enable. I'm all about com-power and con-able. And I know that they're a bit ugly, but they're all compound Latin words anyway. And empower and enable are like this. Com-power and con-able are with. And it's about supporting people to do the thing they want. And all of the time we're telling people, your little idea that you're worried about that is a bit shit is perfect for us. I'm not saying it's easy, Cindy. This is the hardest part of the work. And you won't achieve it totally in any Fun Palace ever. But if we aim for that as our big aim, then the bits that are somewhere in between, the fully led, the slightly led, the somebody just turns up and says, can I do something? And we say yes. It's all in there. And our understanding and what we've seen happen is that these ones who go, can I just do something? Am I allowed? They'll come back next year or during the year, even better, and go, can I try something else? That's where it makes change. And it certainly doesn't happen in one go. Does that help?
Yeah, it does. It's just I'm thinking a lot about people that I have come into, and particularly older people.
Yes.
And thinking about, you know, and thinking about the whole idea of which we've talked about is the fact that we've lost a lot of people. And a lot of them are older people. So there's going to be a real generational shift here after this, and a lot of those older people are actually in very close communities already, and I'm already thinking about how to actually bring them out into the community and make their voices and they have so many skills and things that are being lost, but for so many of them, because they're not participating in the wider community already and are not on those Facebook groups, and you know, that it maybe does take a bit more facilitation. tip to be able to go into the community.
Take a bit on your part to bring them in.
Yeah.
Once they're there, I think it's about letting them go.
Yeah.
And standing there, you know, ready to catch them if they fall. Particularly the 75-year-old who's been told to stay indoors for 4 months while watching other people be allowed to go out and party. Particularly that person. But maybe they can come to their front window and share a skill 3 times in one day. Maybe. And the same with the young people, you know, the young people who are being told they don't know anything and they're being irresponsible. The 15, 16-year-old, get them to those ones. When they come together, that's when the magic is.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you.
And Cindy, yeah, I think just to add on that before we finish, it is very much a process. So, you know, we have seen lots of fun palaces which have been much more led, you know, and over time, what's interesting is as Stella says, it's that relationship between, you know, trying to encourage that to change and participants who come in one year to take more of a lead the next year. And I think that's really where the exciting, the more kind of almost revolutionary aspects are. And that's the, you know, that artists and scientists play a really vital role in it. But for that weekend, by suspending that and doing something completely different, connecting with communities, via a very different identity, then actually, you know, beautiful things happen afterwards as well. But you're right, you know, we're not trying to underplay the capacity issue around that. There still requires lead makers to take up the mantle, and that is hard. And very often it will build off existing relationships and existing work. But if it's an excuse to try something a little bit different, to flip the narrative, you know, if you have a youth group, that's the weekend they lead something, not the other way around, you know, and then what exciting things develop from that afterwards as well. So not trying to undermine the difficulty and the challenge around that. And I think that capacity issue is absolutely, you know, we're very aware that's going to be even more the case moving forward. But it's just trying to maybe flip what we're prioritizing. It is past 2:30. I'm very aware that it's been a long workshop. So thank you, first off, everyone who's come along and asked questions. This is the first of many. If you have more questions, I'm going to email everyone some of the core links. So there's ways that you can get in touch with all the different makers and the ambassadors and with the core team afterwards. So please see this as the beginning. And if you have any more questions, you know, we're all just a phone call or email away. But thank you once again